Okay, well, no question you're all awake. What we're going to do now is we have a tremendous amount of information that we are going to cover today on anti-aging, age reversal, and exploring the limits of human lifespan. So let's go ahead and get into that now. So we want to know, what are the limits of human lifespan? There's a lot of ways to look at this, and there are many differing opinions in the scientific community. We're going to start at what might at first seem to be a little bit of an unusual place when we're talking about the subject of stopping aging and age reversal, and that is it possible to regrow a lost limb? As you're going to see, the two of these phenomena are intimately connected. They're actually different expressions of the same thing. So we're going to look at some work from Tufts University on the subject of the biodome. And what's so interesting about this is that this is, if you take a frog that does not have the ability to regrow a lost limb and you sever it, and then you're taking 5 biochemicals that act as signaling molecules, and you place this over the amputation site just for 24 to 48 hours. Within a period of anywhere from 9 to 18 months, after that initial signal, the limb will completely regrow or nearly regrow. So, what's important about this is that it just required the initial impulse of information, and then it required having the fuel to drive the regenerative process, the energy, the amino acids, the protein synthesis. And this is something that Lifewave does extraordinarily well. Our patches are a communication system that feed the body with information. So this tells us that this type of technology is within reach, the ability to regrow lost limbs. So we have to wonder, how far away are we from being able to do this in human beings? So let's examine this a little bit further. Biodome was placed at the injury site for 24 hours after an 18-month process. So this is information transfer. In the case of these experiments at Tufts, this was all done through biochemistry, but ultimately we know that it's light that controls the biochemical reactions within the body. Light initiates these communications. The 18-month process was for regeneration. So this tells us that there is a limit at which new proteins can be synthesized. However, we've actually found in our experiments with a device called the double helix conductor that it's possible to overcome biological limitations on protein synthesis. But in any case, the important part of this is that regeneration requires energy. So you can think about this in your own life. If you have an injury that has not healed, first introduce the signal to initiate healing. And that can come from a variety of different means, the correct biochemistry or light, such as with our patches. And then you need the energy to drive the process. So this is where we have a healthy diet. You get your proper nutrition. You need enough protein in your diet to supply all of the raw materials that are required for regeneration. So when we're going to look at a very complex subject, such as human aging, we can distill this down into the principles of energy and information. So in everything that we're going to be covering today, I'd like you to keep this in mind. Keep coming back to this idea. If it seems too complicated, keep coming back to this idea that this is all being driven through energy and information. So why would aging be any different than this? If we provide the information and the energy to a biological system, we should be able to reverse human aging. And as you're going to see, this is absolutely possible. So one of the questions then is, if we know what it takes to drive mitochondrial energy, which is going to be the source of energy production in our cells, where do we get the information from to drive the regenerative process? So we're going to look at clues. And we're going to look at nature, and we're going to also look historically at human aging and see what we can find. And a place to start, interestingly enough, is the story of the tree of life. So we look at this quote from Genesis 3:22. And as you know, the Bible was written in Hebrew, but we're looking at it in English right now, and it's important for us to have that frame of reference. So God says, okay, well, now that man has sinned, if he eats from the fruit of the tree of life, he'll live forever. So Adam lived 930 years. The question that we ask ourselves is this a real, factual account, a historical account? Is that a real number? Or is this just a story that was made up? Is there anything that we can point to, any information that would allow us to see, is this a real, true number? Because the implication is that if these ages that are recorded in the Bible are true and factual, it means that human beings have already lived to be more than 900 years old. And now this is a process of rediscovery. We have to understand how was that possible. So we're going to convert the English over to the original Hebrew and then use gematria to convert those letters back over into numbers. So if we take the phrase tree of life, depending on the calculator that we use, we come up with the number 66. What's interesting about this is that 66 is a harmonic of the number 528, if we think of this in musical terms. So in other words, we're going to look at the number 66 as a frequency, and then we're going to double that frequency to get a harmonic, and we come up with 528. So we look in the literature, and interestingly enough, what we see is that a frequency of 528 hertz has been used to regenerate damaged DNA. So incredibly, embedded into the story of Genesis and the story of the tree of life is numerical information that tells us how to regenerate damaged DNA. There is no way that could have been known thousands of years ago, if we believe in the way history was telling us. But let's look at some clinical studies, because this is actually very interesting. We're in California. I thought some of the men here might be interested in knowing, how do you elevate testosterone, right? It's not summer, but we are still in California. So there's not a local Radio Shack, I think, that's open anymore where you can go out and get a frequency generator. But you men, you might want to know 528 hertz elevates testosterone production. Pretty cool. So this is an example of how we're using energy to control the biochemistry of the body, not necessary to get external injections of testosterone. Another example, if we use a different way to calculate the tree of life number, it comes up with 159. Now, in this example, what we're going to want to do is convert that over into a wavelength of light. And you can do this very simply with an online calculator. There's a very well-known formula for converting frequencies over into nanometers, and light is in the nanometer range. So in this particular case, we convert the tree of life frequency over into a wavelength of light, and we come up with 857 nanometers. Why is that significant? Well, research has shown in this band of light that this activates mitochondrial energy. And time again, what's been demonstrated in clinical studies is that one of the principal reasons why we age is because of a decline in mitochondrial function. In fact, when we restore mitochondrial function to a young, healthy state, we see the age of the cell become younger. So again, incredibly embedded into the Holy Bible, in the story of the tree of life, is frequency and light information that we can use to improve our quality of life by restoring mitochondrial function, and have a key in understanding how we can stop and reverse human aging. So, what can we take from all of this? All living systems depend on energy to survive. You stop energy production in a cell, and the cell dies, so this is known. All living systems depend on information. We're constantly collecting information in our environment, and we're responding to it. So our cells are constantly responding and adapting with this very complex communication system of information using light. Experiments demonstrated that it is possible to regenerate a lost limb in a species that doesn't have this capability simply by providing energy and information. And most importantly, when we're looking at quality of life and improving quality of life, experiments have shown that it is in fact possible to reverse the age of the cells using this biochemical information. And we see evidence that the information presented in the Holy Bible is in fact true. So this is exciting. So it means that the potential exists that human beings have already lived to be over 900 years old, and now we just have to rediscover how that could be possible. So next up, let's take a look at what the current limits of human lifespan are and what we can do about that. So let's go to the video.
If you look maybe 50 years from now or 100 years from now, a person born then, what do you think is a good goal in terms of how long a person would live?
Well, so it changes all the time because technology is changing so quickly. I keep revising the number upward. But I would say that if you do the right things during your life and start at an early age, let's say 25, we don't want malnutrition, starvation. That's not what I'm talking about. But in your 20s, start eating the kind of diets that I talked about, skipping meals. In animals, that gives you an extra 20 to 30%. We don't know if that's true for humans, and that would, even 5% more would be a big deal for the planet. I think that we should all aim to at least reach a century. I'm a little bit behind. I was born too early to benefit the most from all of this discovery. Those of you who are in your 20s, you should definitely aim to reach 100. I don't see why not. Consider this is really important. The average lifespan of a human that looks after themselves but doesn't pay attention is about 80. Okay, Japan, that's the average age for a male, a bit higher. If you do the right things in your life, which is eat healthy food, don't overeat, don't become obese, do a bit of exercise, get good sleep, and don't stress, that gives you on average 14 extra years. That gets you to 94. So getting to 100, if you just focus on what I'm talking about, it's not a big deal. Mm-hmm. So what's the maximum? Well, we know that one human made it to 122 and a number of them make it into their teens. I think that's also the next level of where we can get to with the types of technologies that I'm talking about. How long can we ultimately live? Well, there's no maximum limit to human lifespan. Why can a whale live 300 years, but we cannot? We're basically the same structure. We just need to learn from them. So anyone who says, "Oh, you max out at X," I think is full of it. There's nothing that I've seen that says biological organisms have to die. There are trees that live for thousands of years, and their biochemistry is pretty close to ours.
Okay. So there's many different views in the scientific community on limits of human lifespan. Dr. Sinclair is focused on this subject, and I'm happy to see that he believes that there are no limits of human lifespan, like many people in the anti-aging and age reversal community. But let's take a look at this a little bit deeper. Here's an article that's from Nature, a well-respected journal, and looking at the evidence for human lifespan. And in this article, the author states, well, we might expect that humans might live to be a maximum of 115 years old. Overall, that's pretty good, I think, for most people, but let's look at it a little bit differently. One of the things that's interesting about this is we've had people live to be over 120 years old. Now, I don't think most people want to live to be 120 and necessarily look like this. No offense to this young lady here. So the key is we don't want to be 120 or 150 or 200 and look that way. Premise behind this is that you're reversing the biological age of the cell. So there's no difference in appearance between a 25 or 30-year-old and someone that's 120 or 150 years old. That's the goal to shoot for. Many other scientists in the age reversal community believe that there's no upper limit to human lifespan, and it's more statistically, what are your odds over time of avoiding accidents, avoiding serious health problems. But we know that information is always doubling very, very quickly now. So if we live another 10 years, the information, the technology that we'll have access to is many times greater than where we are today. So what's the most optimistic view on human lifespan in the conventional scientific community and beyond? In age reversal community, they say it's about 1,000 years or so, which interestingly lines up with the numbers that we see in the book of Genesis. So what does science tell us about what we can expect in our lifetime now? There's some articles, again, out in Nature, which suggest that given current technology, they obviously don't know about Lifewave, they would put human lifespan somewhere around 100 years or so, which I don't think makes sense at all, given the pace of development. So we look to nature. In our labs, we study biomimetics. So this means we want to look to natural living systems for answers. Why try to invent a new technology when nature already provides us with a guide? We simply have to study species that defy normal human aging and then see what we can learn and then apply those principles over to human beings. So let's take a quick review of some species that age in a different way than human beings, or they don't age at all. We'll start with the bowhead whale. Longest living mammal, up to about 200 years of age, and they have a slower metabolism than human beings, and they live in very cold waters, so this is a contributor to their very long lifespan. Now we can go way over to the other side, and we look at the glass sponges with lifespans of 10,000 to 15,000 years. King's holly in Tasmania, 43,600 years. There's a single colony of Mediterranean seagrass over 100,000 years old. So there are plenty of examples that we can study. You say, well, this is a plant. We can look at the species of bat, brant bat. They should only live to be 2 or 3 years old because their metabolism is so rapid. And when the metabolism is faster, that means you're producing much more oxidative stress, and the oxidative stress damages healthy cells. But interestingly, we can study the bat, and what we find is that they've developed a mechanism. They've been created with these remarkable biochemical systems that adapt to their stress so they can fly. And they can live to be 30 years of age. So this would be the equivalent to 180 years in human beings. So this means now we have a biological model that we can look at and mimic and create new technology and apply it to human beings. So what are some of the things that we see in bats? Well, they have exceptional control over the length of the telomeres, meaning that their cells can continue to divide without the telomeres shrinking. So this is a key factor in longevity. In addition, they have a mechanism by which their cells repair DNA. Now, we already know about biochemistry and energy medicine that will do the same thing. For example, if you keep your glutathione levels elevated, I'm not making a medical claim about our patches, saying if you happen to use a method like taking an N-acetylcysteine supplement for elevating your glutathione, studies have shown that elevated glutathione in the cell will repair damage to the DNA before the cell divides. And there are other mechanisms as well. So efficient DNA repair. Control of inflammation. Inflammation damages healthy cells, can cause breaks in the DNA, and bats have developed a mechanism to do that. So a method for human beings is controlling stress. If you happen to have a product or a technology that can control stress, then you might have a way to do this. I'm just saying. And then also, if we understand what is driving cancer, the standard definition, of course, is that a cancer-causing substance gets into the cell, mutates the stem cell, and then this replicates into a cancer cell. So again, bats have developed mechanisms for dealing with this. But what about human beings? Keep this moving along. Now, let's again go back to the Bible for a moment, and we want to look to see, is there any evidence for these fantastic ages that are in the Bible? And I would encourage you to do this yourself, and you can use any various AI program to make this easy. ChatGPT, Grok 4, whichever one you care to, but make it very easy. So first, you can get a list of all the names that are mentioned in the book of Genesis, along with their corresponding ages, and then this is the list that you'll get. And you'll notice, of course, immediately a trend to where the age starts at 930 with Adam and then goes down to 205. Now we'll plot this on a graph, and you see right away that we have an outlier there in the data with Enoch at 365 years old. Now what does the Bible tell us about Enoch? It tells us that he never died, that God took him. So we remove Enoch from the data, and now we smooth out this curve because it's an outlier. So the next outlier that we want to look at is Noah. And the reason is because that's the point at which ages in the Bible start to decline. And we know that's when the flood occurred. So Noah and then his son Shem. Noah was 600 years old when he entered The ark before the flood, Shem was 98 years old. So Noah lived to be a total of 950, Shem 600. That's very interesting. So we might say, were the conditions that people lived in on the earth different before the flood than after a flood that attribute to this change in lifespan? We might be able to form any number of different theories or hypotheses about this, but it's worth reflecting and thinking about. In any case, we take these ages and we spread them out over time, and we can now ask AI, is this decline in aging statistically significant? Are these just random data points, or is this a statistically significant decay curve? And it turns out that these aren't random numbers at all, that this is a biological decay curve, meaning that we can rely on these ages in the Bible as being true and factual. So we know people lived to be over 900 years old before the flood. Now we just have to figure out why. So the short version of this is that there's evidence that the ages in the book of Genesis are true and factual. So people have already lived to be over 900 years old. So we can, if that's the case, then we can look at how to create technology to duplicate this. And we can look at further evidence. So let's go back now and see what's in the current scientific literature. Is there any evidence that humans can be regenerated to a more youthful state? So you can do the research yourself, or you can ask AI, depending on how you want to do this. So as it turns out, there are many things that we can do today that have an influence on our lifespan. One of them is fasting and calorie restriction. This is going to do two things. Number one, it's going to help clear out zombie cells from the body, and it's also going to reduce the amount of oxidative and inflammatory stress that we experience. So calorie restriction and fasting are known to be methods that we can use to increase our health span and our lifespan. Exercise. Exercise is perhaps one of the most reliable ways of improving longevity. We know that most people, when they get to age 70, they experience sarcopenia, muscle wasting, and because they haven't committed to a life of exercise, that means now also their bone density is going to decrease and make them more susceptible to injury that they may not recover from. In addition, studies have shown that we can use very specific methods of cardiovascular training, which I'm going to teach you during the course of the next 2 days. 80 seconds of the correct type of cardio training per week is enough to cause regeneration in the human heart. And if there's anyone here that can't exercise for 80 seconds a week, I invite you to leave now. So, but please stay. Okay. Another method that's incredibly simple, this was discovered by Dr. Bruce Ames, on the combination of acetyl L-carnitine and alpha-lipoic acid. This combination, both in vitro and in human beings, has shown to boost mitochondrial function and in turn cause older cells to look and function like younger, healthier cells. Oxytocin, the hormone of love. We speak about this frequently at Lifewave, that if we can elevate our oxytocin levels, we can regenerate the muscle tissue in the body back to a younger, healthier state. Yeah. I'll go for that. So we simply adopt an attitude of love and kindness towards others. This has the benefit that we reduce stress on our system. And doesn't matter if you're 70, 80 years old and above, Elevating oxytocin causes those older muscle cells to regenerate to younger, healthier cells. Copper peptide. Copper peptide will reset 1/3 of the human genome back to a younger, healthier state. So we very clearly have evidence that age reversal, again, is possible with a simple peptide. Carnosine. So supplementation with carnosine or beta-alanine, which is the precursor to carnosine, in studies going back 20 years, has shown that this will help to protect the telomeres from degradation. And in experiments with mammals, with mice and rats, there have been 30 to 40% increases in human lifespan. In lifespan in mammals, in those rodents. So now we can see that we have multiple methods that we can employ on a daily basis that are very simple, that will have a practical impact on our age. Glutathione, consistently in human beings that live to be over the age of 100, one thing that they all have in common is their glutathione levels, and it's very understandable why. Glutathione is the body's master antioxidant. It protects the cells from oxidative inflammatory stress and helps to repair damage to DNA. So for example, you go out in the sun, you get too much exposure to the sun, and you get breaks in the DNA. Glutathione will regenerate and repair the DNA before the cell divides, not passing that mutation on to a future cell. This is very well known in the literature. And restoring NAD. So a lot of the work that's being done today on age reversal is looking at precursors to NAD, such as NMN and NR, and even niacin. Just for regular basic vitamin B3 niacin is a precursor to NAD and can help support your NAD levels. We found in our studies with X2O that the X2O water will initiate increases in NAD levels. More on that later. So what can we take from all of this? Well, in the scientific community, some of the consensus is that human lifespan is limited to 120 years. But also, there are scientists that think that there is no upper limit to human lifespan, or maybe that will peak out around 1,000 years. There's species on this planet that defy normal aging, so we can use this information and we can use these species as a biological model for applying what we learn over to human beings. There's evidence that the ages in the Bible are true and factual. There's scientific evidence that it's possible to reverse the age of human cells. So, up next, we're going to talk about Lifewave and lifespan. But first, let's go to this video.
I simply define aging as the lifelong accumulation of damage in the body that is generated as side effects of the normal metabolic processes that keep us alive from one day to the next. The analogy with a car or an aeroplane or any other man-made machine is absolutely valid. They do damage to themselves in the course of their normal operation, and they're only set up to tolerate a certain amount of that damage. But, as you say, by sufficiently comprehensive preventative maintenance, we can keep a car going as long as we like, irrespective of how long it was designed to last. People cling to this completely fallacious idea that there is some kind of biologically meaningful difference between the diseases of aging on one side and aging itself on the other side. There is no such thing. Everything that predominantly goes wrong with people late in life and not early in life is part of aging, whether we call it a disease or not.
How does this play out? Like, what should people be ready for?
It's a very, very important question. And I believe that actually the next few years, the next 3 to 5 years, are going to be the critical ones, because that's the period during which this already increasing, burgeoning understanding of the imminence of these technologies is going to really take off and become general. Most people will realize that these therapies are probably coming soon, probably in time for them. And that's the point when they're going to make changes to their lives as a result of expecting to live a lot longer than they previously expected to live. We have to really urgently develop new products that will be ready to roll out when this change in people's expectations of how long they're going to live starts to happen. Because when it does start to happen, it's going to spread like wildfire.
Okay, so let's take a look at Lifewave and Lifespan and some of the things that you can be implementing to have an impact today on your overall quality of life. So the goal here is that not only do we want to increase lifespan, but we want to increase health span, meaning that as you age, you stay younger in the process, and we even reverse some of the signs and symptoms of aging. If we can do this, then that means we decrease our risk of all-cause mortality. So for example, if we implement a regular program of eating healthy and exercise, and we maintain a healthy body composition, and we stay strong, then what we do is we reduce our risk of diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and cancer, just to name a few. So these are really important things that will have an impact on quality of life, not just that we're trying to extend life, we're trying to extend the amount of time that we can have productive, youthful years. So let's look on some research of some specific nutrients, for example, that you could include. So notably, the body's levels of glutathione decline with age. And for all the reasons already mentioned, glutathione as the master antioxidant is going to be a key strategy in extending human life and maintaining health. Glutathione also, of course, is principal antioxidant in the liver, which facilitates detoxification. So in a world that we live in today, which is full of contaminants, we need to maintain our body's levels of glutathione because it is the backbone of our defensive system. So of course, we have two products that will help support your body's levels of glutathione. One is the glutathione patch, and the other is Celergize, which contains the precursors that your body needs to make glutathione. And there are a number of studies that we have in our back office that demonstrate how this patch elevates glutathione. Depending on what your diet is like and what you do with supplementation will depend on your ability to make glutathione. So for example, if you are a vegan or a vegetarian, you may not be getting enough of the amino acid cysteine in your diet or the mineral selenium, which is a necessary precursor for making glutathione. So that's why we included N-acetylcysteine in Celergize and selenium, so you could get those nutrients. Now, carnosine is a nutrient that everyone should be taking or elevating because it has enormous health benefits. First, as we've already discussed, carnosine protects the telomeres, and this is going to protect our ability to make new cells. So we consider this. When we get into our mid-70s, our cells reach what's called the Hayflick limit. The number of times the cells can divide are defined by this limit. And in humans, it's about 70 to 75. So at that point, we're no longer making younger, healthier cells. the telomeres, since they're regulating cell division, if we can simply use methods to lengthen the telomeres or prevent them from decaying, which happens in all species that don't age, then we can continue to make younger, healthier cells way beyond the limit of 75. In addition, carnosine is stored in the brain and in the muscle tissue. So our research with carnosine demonstrates that in addition to improving cognition, also improves strength and stamina. So when we consider all-cause mortality in individuals above the ages of 50, 60, 70, one of the key things that we see is that this is closely linked to strength and stamina. Meaning if you're exercising, if you're using nutrients like carnosine to maintain strength, your risk of dying from anything declines. Now, one of the key factors in aging is stress. So if we live a life where we work long hours, we're not taking methods to manage stress, we have stress in our personal life, we have stress at work, we're not taking time to exercise, meditate, pray, then this will ultimately cause a health crisis in our life. Emotional stress is linked to oxidative and inflammatory stress. So when we have these negative emotions, it has a detrimental physical impact on the body. It's important to recognize that. So Eon, what we have found, within about 15 seconds, reduces the stress on the nervous system. We did this study, one of the important studies that we did with Eon was with Dr. Tom Budzinski, and we used a piece of technology, it's called thought technology, and it measures changes in the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. And what we found is that within 15 seconds of applying the Eon patch, the nervous system goes into balance. So that's why we market this as a product for managing stress. Now here's a fun fact. Very often I'll be asked, well, we know the glutathione patch elevates glutathione. We know X39 elevates copper peptide. Why don't we show what peptide Eon will elevate? And the reason why we don't talk about that is because if you were to do a search on that peptide, you would immediately see medical applications for that peptide, and we don't want to make those claims for this patch since we don't study it that way. But the Eon patch was developed as a result of research that was done, interestingly enough, on bees. So if you take a peptide that naturally occurs in the human body, in the liver, and this peptide declines with age, and you take that peptide and you inject it into a worker bee, you can increase the lifespan of the worker bee to be equivalent to a queen bee. And turns out that the queen bee, the reason why they live longer is because they're eating the royal jelly, and that peptide is found in the royal jelly. So this is a very good example of how we can look to nature and find clues to how different species are defying normal aging and then apply that over to human beings. So use of the Eon patch elevates this peptide. It will reduce stress on your nervous system, reduce inflammatory oxidative stress, and we certainly believe this will ultimately have very beneficial impact on longevity. Now, copper peptide. We don't have enough time today to cover all the benefits of X39 and copper peptide, but a simple search will reveal that there are numerous benefits to using X39 and elevating your copper peptide. We know that copper peptide levels decline by over 60% after the age of 60. So we have to have a strategy if we want to improve our longevity. We have to have a strategy for increasing our body's levels of copper peptide. Again, with Celergize, we include the nutrients that are required to make copper peptide, just in case you don't have the best diet. So some of the benefits are cosmetic in the sense that we're repairing the skin. But keep in mind that collagen is the #1 protein in the body. So if we're seeing these effects show up in the skin, we know that they're also occurring throughout the body, improving skin firmness, elasticity, reduction of fine lines and wrinkles, even improving the structure of aged skin. This is an important one because when we do research on human aging, one of the key things that you see is that the physical structure of the cell changes over time. The cell has what's called a cytoskeleton, which is made of a matrix of collagen protein. So it's like jello inside the cell. And the organelles are attached to this collagen matrix. When we're age 25, levels of collagen begin to drop. So we could say, in effect, that around age 25, we start to age. So we need to have methods of increasing collagen production and maintaining the integrity of the cell, and copper peptide is one of the methods that we can use for that. Another interesting effect of copper peptide is reducing photo damage. I would encourage all of you to make sure you're getting enough copper in your diet. In physics, we would create a Faraday cage to screen out electromagnetic radiation. And these Faraday cages are made of copper. Well, it turns out the same thing happens in human beings. The skin stores copper. And if we get enough copper in our diet, it can help to act like a Faraday cage and screen out harmful UV light. So this is something that we should be doing, getting enough copper in our diet to protect us from unwanted exposure to UV. And of course, copper peptide improves overall skin appearance, protection from UV radiation. Copper peptide manages inflammation in the body, and of course, other things that we can't talk about. And you're not talking about either on these conference calls, right? All right. And of course, the big one relative to our conversation today is that copper peptide, which was discovered by Laurent Picard. I hope he wins a Nobel Prize for his discovery, 50 years doing research in this area. And he found that copper peptide resets 1/3 of the human genome back to a more youthful state. So this is really key. There's a phenomena called parabiosis. And this was discovered more than 150 years ago. And essentially it was found that if you take the blood from a young animal, like a rat, and you put that into an older rat, that the older rat starts to become younger. And the same effect occurs in human beings. And one of the principal factors that's driving that process is copper peptide. So again, we can look to nature. And we've done numerous studies on X39 now. So very, very early on in 2018, we had developed protocols working with a lab on how to measure GHK and GHK-Cu levels in human beings. And so we did our initial pilot studies, and we found that application of X39 did in fact elevate levels of GHK within 24 hours and levels of copper peptide within 7 days. So the copper peptide is formed first, and then very quickly it binds with copper. And by the way, both GHK and GHKCU are biologically active, meaning there's beneficial effects from both of those peptides. So this is why when people start to use X39, they find within the first day that they're already sleeping better, they have improved energy and other effects. So, and then I click past that other slide a little bit too quickly, but of course you can get this in your back office. That was an initial pilot study, but then we did a double-blind placebo-controlled study, and we found the same thing, that X39 is indeed elevating copper peptide. Okay, oh, and there it is back up over there. Thank you, kind person, in audio video. So these studies are available in your back office. We don't need to go through them now, but this is just to say that we're doing the research studies on our products in this field of anti-aging and age reversal. So first, you can have the confidence in knowing that this is a science-based company. We support our products with proper research, but also we're on the cutting edge of looking at what is possible in stopping and reversing human aging. And there's a lot more to the story, but we're going to watch this video and then come back.
You know, we all kind of lose function in our bodies as we get older, right? Like the big things that, if you look at the biggest killers, it's like heart disease, cancer, diabetes. So a lot of medicine is targeting how do you treat that disease. But there's another theory, which is like maybe the root cause of all those things is that, you know, our cells are just losing function as we get older, and so you're more susceptible to get these diseases. Like, I'll give you an example. So if you're like, let's say you're in your 20s or 30s, and you know, you have some damage to your cells, like you drink too much, or you get sick, or like, you know, and there's kind of like this insult or damage to your cells. Your cells have the ability to recover from that. When you get older, your cells don't really have the ability to respond as well to these kinds of threats, or like, you know, it could be viruses, or, you know, eating or drinking too much, or not getting enough sleep or whatever. They start to lose their function. And so instead of treating like the effects of these diseases, why don't we just try to restore the function your cells had when you were younger? Because like, who wouldn't want to feel like you had the metabolism or immune system or whatever, or the muscle system of like a younger person, right? Mm-hmm. That would just be more years of healthy life, you know, to get stuff done. So anyway, I think we're on the cusp of potentially being able to make a breakthrough in this area. And it's high risk, but I think this is exactly what people should be doing. Like if you have some success in business, like try to push the frontier, right? Do something that's really challenging. What we're trying to do is not change the type of the cell. We're trying to just change the functional age of the cell. Like if it starts as a skin cell, stay as a skin cell, but just be like a younger version of yourself. And so we're searching the vast space of different sets of proteins. They're called transcription factors, which basically turn on and off different genes in the cell. There's like a massive number of combinations of these that are potential. We've developed a high throughput screening system that can test like millions of hypotheses, looking for novel sets of proteins you can put in these cells that change the state of it back to like a younger cell. And we know that.
So you're injecting proteins, and
yeah,
it would be an injection of proteins into the body that the cells absorb?
Yeah, and they're delivered via this thing called lipid nanoparticles. But yeah. It's basically a way to deliver proteins into these cells, and it causes them to turn on and off different genes.
Wow.
Yeah.
How far out do you think you are?
I mean, we're going to start clinical trials on our first program probably in the next year or two in humans. And that's where you have to go through FDA, or different countries you can do it in. And then we have 2 or 3 other programs coming along. So I think within like 5 to 10 years, we'll hopefully have candidates ready for, you know, potentially someone could actually go get it prescribed by their doctor in like, hopefully like less than 10 years. But, you know, these are kinds of things that sometimes you need to try a lot of shots on goal to get something that works, mm-hmm. right? And it can start to get expensive the later you are down doing these human trials. Like it costs something like $2 billion and takes about 10 years to get a drug to market. And that's with a lot of failures along the way. So, you know, we're we're putting a lot of capital to see if we can come up with a breakthrough here.
Who wants to be part of that, right? Any way to make us look younger and feel younger, right? Well, thank you so much, David. We're going to be hearing from him in just a few minutes. But our next speaker is Dr. Gita Jensen, a hands-on scientist with more than 35 years of experience in biological sciences and natural products research. As research director at NIS Labs, she helps design research that's not only ethical and effective, but truly meaningful. While she couldn't be here with us in person today, she has recorded a special presentation just for this audience. Let's take a look.
Hi, my name is Gita Jensen, and I'm the research director at NIS Labs. We have conducted clinical research on the Lifewave X39 patch, and I'm speaking to you today to present our results. My background is in immunology. I have a PhD from University of Aarhus in Denmark. I went on to work as a postdoc in cancer biology at University of Alberta in Canada. And I became an assistant professor at McGill University, studying systems biology involving both immune cells and stem cells. And I'm the founder and the research director at NIS Labs. I have worked with research on natural products for over 30 years. We use mainstream tools to ask questions about unusual methods for supporting health. My passion is to find truth in ancient traditional healing methods and to help talk about them in words that modern science can embrace. To do this, I founded our lab, NIS Labs. At NIS Labs, we study the mechanisms that allow our immune cells to travel around in our body to protect everything. Here's a drawing of some sleepy cells, both inside the blood vessel and in the tissue. There are some NK cells and some B cells, some T cells, and some macrophages. This sleepy picture can change pretty rapidly. X39 helps the immune system to be alert and happy. We want the cells moving to protect our entire body in the blood, the skin, the gut, and all parts of us. And we want the cells to communicate. We also study the processes inside ourselves of making cellular energy. Our health is not a simple on-off switch. We know that our overall health is a result of endless interconnected processes, starting with cellular energy, supporting our immune system's alertness, communicating in the body with nerves and chemical messengers, and then a feedback loop with anti-inflammatory effects. Based on how complex our body is, I was very excited when I learned about the X39 patch, a tiny little thing that makes light, not just on its own, but only when it's applied to the skin. When you look at the patch, you don't see the light. I knew we had to study this. We conducted a clinical trial to document what happens within the first few hours after you put on an X39 patch on the back of your neck. The results were very clear. And these results is what I will be presenting to you today. First, I want to tell you about how we did this study, where each person served as their own control. Each study participant came for 2 clinic visits and used the X39 patch on one visit and a placebo patch on another visit. We took blood samples immediately before applying a patch and then at 1 and 2 hours later. People were sitting quietly and resting and doing it in the same way, both on the X39 day and the placebo day, and they rested calmly in a quiet room between the blood draws. Now, the placebo patch looked exactly like the X39 patch, but did not contain the things that make light when it is applied to the skin. And the study was randomized. This means that different participants used the X39 patch on the first visit and placebo on the second visit, and other participants used the placebo on the first visit. The X39 patch and the placebo patch had two different numbers written on the back, but neither the participants nor the clinic staff knew which patch was which. Now, while we know that we can measure changes in the blood after consuming natural products, we were not sure what was going to happen when we applied the X39 patch to the skin. We hoped to see some changes, and we expected that they would be mild. Our results were amazing. We had two surprises, one that had to do with cellular energy and another that had to do with reduced inflammation. Before I tell you more about these findings, I need to introduce you to those two topics. Let's talk about energy first. In order to talk about the ways we documented changes in cellular energy in the X39 study, let's look at the parts inside each of our cells that make energy, the mitochondria. Inside every cell in our body, we have bubbles, tiny little bubbles that are called mitochondria. This is where energy is being made. They are literally the powerhouses of our providing energy for our entire body. The mitochondria have a unique machinery inside, similar to a conveyor belt, that's called the electron transport chain. So that electricity that is being transported is where I have these little lightning bolts on this drawing. They use this electron transport, they use this to supercharge energy into molecules called ATP. So the mitochondria are subcellular energy factories. The ATP is loaded with energy that can be sent out into the body and give energy to our muscles, our brain, and everything else that burns energy for our body to function. So as part of the X39 study, on all clinic visits, we took the blood samples into the laboratory and we studied the mitochondria. And already after 1 hour of wearing an X39 patch, the mitochondria were larger than 1 hour after wearing a placebo patch. This process of getting larger mitochondria is called mitochondrial biogenesis, and we know it can happen within hours after consuming certain nutraceutical supplements. However, we had no idea that this type of change happens and can be measured in the blood 1 hour after putting on an X39 patch. And how it happens, we don't fully understand yet, since we don't fully understand the code for how our cells communicate with light inside the body. Now let's talk about inflammation. Inflammation is related to aging and accelerates aging, and the loss of cellular energy also accelerates aging. Also, in terms of regulating inflammation, the X39 patch worked quickly. The anti-inflammatory marker IL-1RA increased rapidly and was increased at 1 hour, and the pro-inflammatory cytokine IL-8 decreased. This change was rapid, creating a boost of cellular communication that helped regulate inflammation. This wave of cellular communication also involved reduced levels of C-reactive protein, another inflammatory blood marker. After that initial boost of anti-inflammatory activity at 1 hour, we observed that at 2 hours, the levels of C-reactive protein were reduced. So it seems that applying the X39 patch to the skin initiates measurable changes that spreads throughout our whole body. It's like adding a drop of water into a silent lake, and the drop starts ripples, and the ripples expand outward. And it starts waves of orchestrated changes in the body involving rapid increase in energy and rapid regulation of inflammation. Now let's shift gears a little. There was a second part to this clinical trial. After the first part of the clinical trial was done, all the participants then used the X39 patch every day for 4 weeks. And this part of the clinical trial allowed us to see what happened with daily use over time. We studied the blood cells after 1 day and 1 week and 4 weeks. And this further helped solidify that applying an X39 patch has effects that we can quantify and that we can discuss scientifically. And the X39 patch works long term. Already after 1 day of using X39, the cells were able to maintain a higher energy production under stress. The small umbrellas here and here over each mitochondria show that they're protected from stress. The green circles show that the size of the mitochondria is protected under stress, and the purple lightning bolts illustrate that the electrical charge inside the mitochondria are protected under stress. The mitochondria can continue to make more energy and more ATP. We tested many other blood markers in all the blood samples in the X39 study, and we saw additional evidence of ongoing changes and adaptation when using the X39 patch. Examples include the anti-inflammatory marker IL-1RA that was increased at 1 week, and the pro-inflammatory markers IL-8 and TNF-alpha were decreased at 1 day and 4 weeks. So when the X39 patch is used daily, the body experiences daily waves of adjustment to cellular energy, cellular resilience, and reduced inflammation. Every time a new X39 patch is applied, a fresh wave of adaptation and boost of energy happens. Now, as I'm winding down my presentation, a reminder to all of us. For us to age gracefully in good health, we need to tend to our body like a garden. We need to clean up the dead leaves, tend to the flowers, keep the soil hydrated and nutrient-rich. The use of the X39 patch generated results showing orchestrated waves of events, starting with mitochondrial biogenesis and continuing with increased mitochondrial membrane potential, anti-inflammatory markers, reduced pro-inflammatory biomarkers, and an increase in energy. I thank you for the opportunity to share with you our scientific results from the clinical trial on wearing the X39 patch. And congratulations to David Smith and the Lifewave team for your contributions to natural and gentle support of health and wellness. Thank you.
What if I told you there's a creature that doesn't age like we do? No wrinkles, no slowing down, just endless molting and growing. Meet the lobster, nature's closest thing to biologically immortal. But if they don't age, why and how do they die? And what does it have to do with human aging? First, let's clear something up. Biological immortality doesn't mean can't die. It means the creature doesn't age in the typical sense, no increase in mortality risk over time. Lobsters grow bigger and reproduce efficiently even in old age. Some have lived over 100 years. So what's the secret? Inside our cells, DNA strands are packed into chromosomes. At the ends of those chromosomes are telomeres, protective caps like the plastic tips on shoelaces. Every time a cell divides, those telomeres get shorter. Eventually, they become too short and the cell stops dividing or dies. That's called cellular senescence, and it's a big part of aging. Lobsters produce large amounts of an enzyme called telomerase, even into adulthood. This enzyme adds new sequences to the ends of telomeres, essentially rebuilding them. This means their cells don't suffer the usual wear and tear from division. They can keep growing, healing, and reproducing without signs of aging. But it's not a perfect system. As lobsters grow, they need to molt. shedding their exoskeleton, but the larger they get, the more energy molting requires. Eventually it becomes too physically demanding. In many cases, they die from complications during molting, not from aging itself. So technically, they're immortal at the cellular level, but not invincible. Could understanding telomerase help us fight aging in humans? Maybe. But unregulated telomerase is also linked to cancer, so it's complicated. For now, lobsters remain a fascinating glimpse into how nature plays by different rules. The immortal lobster? Maybe not forever, but definitely longer than most.
How about that Dr. Gita Jensen, huh? She has become a very valuable partner for us in performing clinical studies. She really wanted to be here today, but had a complication in travel plans, but maybe we'll have her here next year to talk about some additional research that we're doing on other patches with her. She's a fantastic researcher. We're blessed to be working with her. I also really love her accent. You know, she's from Denmark, and something about an American hearing that Danish accent, it just sounds so authoritative. I often wonder if I should adopt an accent to sound more authoritative, but so far what I'm going with seems to have worked, so I'll stay with it. All right, so what are the signs that a cell is aging? So this is where, again, we're going to look towards nature for clues. If we can examine the structure of cells and how they change over time, we can learn about how to stop or even reverse these changes. So let's look at some of them. One is, we know that as cells age, they become more and more dehydrated. Part of this is linked to collagen production. So if we think of collagen like a jello that holds water, and collagen production begins to decline at around age 25, then it makes sense that the cells can hold less water. So this is a very important concept. We want to be able to improve hydration if we're going to change the way that people age. As the cells age, they begin to shrink. And there is what's called a membrane potential. So the electrolytes of the cell hold a charge around the cell membrane. And as we age and the collagen matrix begins to decline, that electrical charge decreases. And one thing you won't normally see in textbooks is that the charge around the cell is intimately linked to the replication of our DNA. The DNA, and that's because this has more to do with biophysics than biochemistry. The DNA is a helical coil. It's an inductor in electrical terms. So as the membrane potential decreases, the amount of energy that the cell has to pass along to a future cell decreases. So this is an important part of how we can define aging, meaning that if we can restore proper hydration, increase the size of the cell, increase the electrical potential of the membrane, we can stop and reverse human aging. That's part of the process. This is also linked to mitochondrial function. So the amount of energy that we have for making new proteins, for repairing damage, is all linked back to the mitochondria. And we know that most people experience mitochondrial dysfunction around age 50 or so. So we want to adapt strategies to keep the mitochondria improving lots of energy, and that's going to help dramatically with our quality of life. Already covered the importance of telomeres. So when we study lobsters, species of ants that don't age or age like human beings, one of the key things that you see over and over again is that their telomeres do not shrink. So we have to have a strategy to address that. Decrease in collagen production. We've already covered that one. Decrease in protein synthesis. So as people get to be 50, 60, 70, they get injured, their ability to heal drops off dramatically, and that's because the ability to make new proteins has declined, and that protein synthesis is again linked to mitochondrial function. So we want to be able to make new proteins so that we can heal. We have to address that. We have to control our detoxification pathways, and there are some simple ways of doing that. But if our body is allowed to accumulate what are called zombie cells, these are cells that don't function but haven't been removed from the body. They will induce oxidative and inflammatory stress on healthy cells and are key in the aging process. So we have to have a strategy for addressing that. Oxidative and inflammatory stress causes breaks in the DNA, damage to healthy tissue. We have to manage that. And then finally, change in genetic expression. So one of the key biological models in human aging is this idea that we begin to lose our library of information of who we are as we age over time. The good news is that what's been discovered is that the information of who we are when we're younger is still there, but that information has gone dormant. So we need to find ways to reactivate that information so the cells can indeed become younger. So let's tackle these one at a time. First, dehydration. What can we do about this? Well, surface tension plays a crucial role in hydration, meaning if you can consume water that through the change in structure or the precise mineral content and the surface tension of the water is lower, it will be able to drive into the cell. And fortunately, this is one of the many benefits of X2O. It is a highly coherent water structure. We're going to see a video of this in the next presentation. But because the water structure of X2O is so coherent, the surface tension drops, and now hydration increases within about 15 seconds of consuming it. The membrane potential. Membrane potential, as it decreases, has all of these negative effects on how our metabolism functions. And one of the things that we found in the very early days of Lifewave was that application of the energy patches not only improved mitochondrial function, but they also increased the volume of the cell. We did that study with Dr. Gaetan Chevalier, where we found the cells actually increased in size, increasing the membrane potential. And that happens within about 20 minutes of the application of the energy patches. So what can we do about mitochondrial function? Everything seems to be coming back to this. So we think of the mitochondria as the powerhouse of the cell. It's where our bodies are making energy. So if we can't make enough energy, nothing else happens. It's a little bit like if you only have $500 in your bank account, you're not going to have a good time at Disney, right? So we have to increase our reserve of cellular energy, and that's going to happen in the mitochondria. And a decline in mitochondrial function is always related to aging. So keep that in mind. If you only had a strategy for increasing mitochondrial function, you would be way ahead of the game. And fortunately, we have many products that address this problem and improve mitochondrial function. X39, Energy Enhancer, Celergize, X2O, amongst others. Okay, decrease in telomere length. This would be a medical claim, so I'm only going to say that studies on carnosine have shown that they protect the telomeres from damaging. However, Celergize, specific nutrients in Celergize, Synthox, and also beta-alanine will not only help contribute to maintaining the length of the telomeres, but beyond that. Collagen. So most people, especially since we're very close to Los Angeles, think of collagen as something that we're going to use to plump up the skin, and that's totally fine. But collagen is the principal protein in the body. About 60% of the protein is collagen, so it's that important to our overall health and function. So when we see that we're elevating collagen production and it has a beneficial outcome on our skin, since the skin is principally collagen protein, then that is also reflected on what's going on inside the body. So if you're simply taking collagen supplements, using one of our patches, even taking vitamin C will stimulate new production of collagen. This is going to show up not only in your skin, but inside the body as well. There's also, of course, many studies which show that X39 and copper peptide specifically will elevate collagen production. So you're getting that benefit. Decrease in protein synthesis. One of the best things that you can do as you age is to exercise and build strength and stamina, and that's muscle protein synthesis. And we'll talk about this a little bit later, but it's very important as a key strategy in anti-aging that you're getting enough protein in your diet. Use as a marker, about 1 gram of protein per pound of your body weight. Could be 0.8 grams per pound of body weight. But the key is that when you're looking at your diet, you should be looking at your protein intake and your intake of healthy fats so you have the raw materials necessary to make these proteins and to heal. And of course, as we've discussed, X39 helps with collagen production and, as we found, overall strength and stamina. So it plays a role in formation of other proteins as well. We also found in our very first clinical study on X2O that it did in fact initiate protein synthesis. We saw the metabolism of amino acids go way up. So one of the things you can do in your experimentation with X2O is add a branched chain amino acid supplement or a protein supplement in X2O before working out, and you may find that your ability to synthesize additional muscle tissue goes up. Sorry, no, I'm going very quickly. We have a lot of ground to cover. Detoxification. So this won't cost anything. If you practice intermittent fasting or regular fasting, it will help to remove these zombie cells from the body. So that's something that you can do that won't cost anything. Also, elevating glutathione. So whether or not that's with the glutathione patch, that's with Celergize, that's with your diet, on a daily basis, get proper hydration and detox, because we're constantly accumulating toxins in our body. Increase in oxidative stress. Well, Synthox that we included in Celergize, very, very powerful as a means of managing oxidative and inflammatory stress, along with the combination of our patches. And again, we've already covered this, so I'm going to keep moving along a little bit. Now, one thing that we're doing some very interesting research on is extra virgin olive oil. And we've been doing these experiments where we try to embed specific wavelengths of light, which we're not going to talk about today, into olive oil for producing new effects. And we think that there's going to be some very interesting outcomes to this work. But olive oil, especially extra virgin olive oil, make sure it's pure, is something you should be including in your daily diet because of all of the benefits. But one of the many benefits is that it's so rich in monounsaturated fats that it provides an anti-inflammatory effect, amongst others. Another benefit, interestingly, Well, let's talk about gene expression and get to this because I'm running a little bit behind. X39, one of the key areas of age reversal is how do we reset genes to a more youthful state. So the idea is that if your genes were expressing at the age of a 25-year-old, even if you were 70 or 80 years old, if you had enough energy to drive the process, then eventually all the cells in your body would become 25 or 30-year-old cells. So that's what's exciting about that. The information is there. We just have to access it. And this happens through a process called methylation. But what would be some of the key ways today that we could restore genes to a healthy state? Well, we know one of them is X39. Physical exercise. Exercise will reset about 70 to 80 genes to a more youthful state. It's not very many when you consider, we might want to be able to reset 15,000 to 20,000, 18,000 genes to a more youthful state. But that's one of the benefits of resistance training and exercise. Olive oil. Actually, another benefit of olive oil, it's more powerful than resveratrol at resetting 2 of the sirtuin genes to a more youthful state. So it's known that there are 8 human sirtuin genes. 2 of those are reset to a more youthful state by olive oil. So yet another benefit by taking that daily. So the short version of this is that when we look at all of the signs and the symptoms of aging, there is very good information to show that there are things that we can do today to improve our health span and our longevity. The primary topic that we want to focus on is gene expression, since the others are resolvable, and how we can restore that information. The implications to this is that the problem of human aging is solvable. And it gives us the hope that not only can we extend how long we live, but we can live productive lives and more youthful lives in the process. Okay, now we're going to go to a short video, and we'll come back and talk about X2O.
This study was done by Ben Levine out of UT Southwest in Dallas. And it's a really, to me, it's seminal, groundbreaking study that isn't talked about enough. By the way, he's just a phenomenal cardiovascular exercise physiologist. I mean, he trained with the biggest giants out there. And what he did was him and his lab took 50-year-olds that were sedentary. So they're middle age, 50 years old, sedentary but otherwise healthy. So you didn't have any other diseases besides being sedentary, which I think is a disease. But they didn't have any other diseases like cardiovascular disease or type 2 diabetes or hypertension, right? So they were otherwise healthy, just not active. And he wanted to see if he could put these guys on a pretty long 2-year training protocol, how would that affect the aging of their heart? So as we age, our hearts typically shrink in size and they get stiffer. And that affects not only our cardiorespiratory fitness and our ability to exercise, and I mentioned our cardiorespiratory fitness goes down with age, but it affects our cardiovascular disease risk as well. And so the reason our hearts get stiffer, by the way, does come down to a lot of glucose. So the more glucose stimulation, more glucose is around in your vascular system, it, through a chemical reaction, forms advanced glycation end products. So this glycation essentially stiffens the collagen that surrounds your myocardium and your pericardium. And so you get like this stiffer heart that can't respond to stress well, So you want your heart to be very plastic and malleable and flexible, right? You don't want it to be stiff.
Doesn't sound good.
Just like you don't want your blood vessels to be stiff. What he wanted to do was see if he could change the structure and the trajectory of these aging hearts. And so he put them on a 2-year training program, which involved the Norwegian 4x4, by the way. And when you start someone out that's, not physically active and you want them to do the Norwegian 4x4, when you have them doing their interval, their 4-minute interval, and this speaks to you as well, or anyone, you don't have to necessarily go as hard as you can the whole 4 minutes. You just have to be working hard that interval.
Yeah, you do have to last 4 minutes, right? So
you have to last 4 minutes. And so some people even start off, they're just briskly walking because that's hard for them, right?
Yeah, totally.
So it's all tailored to the individual. And so some people get really intimidated where they're like, oh, there's no way I could ever do that. Well, actually, these people did do it. And they started out doing Norwegian 4x4, but they also did a variety of other exercises, including moderate intensity and some more vigorous intensity exercise, as well as some resistance training. And the control group was just this like yoga, flexible training sort of stuff that people were doing. By the end of the 2 years, these people were working out about 5 hours a week. And at some point, they were doing 2 Norwegian 4x4s a week, and then they went down to just doing 1 a week. But, over the course of 2 years, they were getting a lot of exercise, about 5 hours a week. And essentially, at the end of those 2 years, the structure of their heart, so the stiffness of it and the, shrinking of it was reversed. So their hearts grew and they became more flexible. And it was reversed in such a way that it was 20 years less aging. So their hearts looked more like 30-year-olds than 50-year-olds, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah, that is amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I think it's also like, well, you think 50, it's too late to start exercising. Well, it's not too late. You can be in your 90s and get benefits. I think that's another really important sort of take home with that story is that, you can reverse your aging of your heart by 20 years if you really put in the effort. Five hours a week is about what I do. About 5 or 6 hours a week. It's a lot of work. I didn't always do that, but I've decided as I started to get into my mid-40s, I'm going to spend less time podcasting and more time exercising because this is my health.
Okay. So in a bit, we're going to, and especially also tomorrow, I'm going to be talking about some of these methods that you can use so you don't have to put in 5 hours per week, but you can get this down to about 10 or 20 minutes per week of exercise. I've been doing this for the past number of months, and my daughter Kelly and I and our research team, we've been working with a scientist at a university that I'm not going to mention because of confidentiality, but he discovered this method when working with Olympic athletes about how to do very short, intense exercise to maximize your efforts and see these very dramatic anti-aging effects in the heart and the cardiovascular system. When I started this, I was using this exercise bike that is specifically designed for this method of training, and I was producing about 650 watts output on this bike, which is good. But then over a very short period of time, I went up to 786 watts of output power, which is equivalent to a competitive athlete. It's not bad for a 62-year-old, right? The other thing I thought that was really important was that 1 horsepower is 750 watts. So now apparently I produce more energy than a horse. Without the big gigantic ass that a horse has, which I'm delighted about. Okay, so how can we, let's go back to the subject we were talking about before. How can we define what aging is? We've looked at the signs and the symptoms of aging, but now let's see if we can put some definition about this. So if we look at the literature, we can go ask AI. One of the theories or the models of aging is that we're programmed to die at a certain age. So this is called the biological clock model, and it simply means that genes change their expression. Certain genes that are on get flipped off, or genes that are flipped off get flipped on over time. Hormones regulate the pace of aging. We know that hormones will change over time in both men and women. The immune system is programmed to decline over a time. That's another theory that's out there. cells wear out over time, telomeres shorten. Telomere biology is probably one of the principal areas that researchers look in. So when we're speaking with scientists in the field of anti-aging or age reversal, many of them strictly focus on telomere biology. And then scientists like Dr. Aubrey de Grey, they focus principally on how to eliminate zombie cells from the body. And they're principally looking at creating drugs that do this. All the while, we know that fasting will remove zombie cells from the body, and a nutrient that is found in peppers called fisetin, that will also facilitate removal of zombie cells. So we can use natural means. We don't have to rely on drugs to do this. And then the DNA mutations that occur over time. Again, this is all addressable. If we keep our glutathione levels elevated as one strategy, we can help to protect our cells from mutating genes. So these are many theories on aging. What can we do to simplify this? Aging can be understood from this simple perspective, is that over time, the amount of energy in our cells declines. So we should be looking at strategies to increase energy. The amount of information that makes us who we are declines over time. So this all has to do with, are you doing things on a daily basis to essentially tell your body that you're alive, you're young, and you're youthful? Are you having a clean, healthy diet that contributes to your overall health? Are you exercising to keep those genes expressing in a more youthful state? Are you hydrating the body? Are you using technology like Lifewave to improve the body of information in the cells? So this is important because if we take this complex subject and we distill it down into this simple principle, which is very easy to understand, now we can develop strategies, we can develop technology to turn older cells into younger, healthier cells. So let's look at a few of these things. And I often use this example because it's something that doesn't cost any money and it's good for the planet, meaning we should all live in a state of love and kindness. If we live in a state of love and kindness, this has an immediate benefit on our own health, is that that's been demonstrated to reduce stress. Secondly, this boosts oxytocin. And as you can see in these visuals, oxytocin, doesn't matter if you're 70 or 80 years old, you will get the benefit of reversing the age of the muscle tissue back to a more youthful state. So we talked about the biodome a little bit earlier, and the reason, again, to bring this up is that the principles involved in stopping and reversing human aging is essentially the same as in regeneration. So we have a very exciting future to look forward to, is that not only we can conquer human aging, but also should we get injured in the years to come, that we can use these same strategies so we don't have to have an artificial limb. We can get our own limb back, or we can get a liver back, or a heart, or a kidney, or what have you. It's all possible to regenerate. So now we look at the very foundation of how it is that we are able to function. And we look at the nucleus of the cell. And what we find is that if you take cells and you put them in an environment that's completely dark and use a photomultiplier tube, you will see that there are highly coherent pulses of light coming out of the cells. And these are not random emission of light, but rather each wavelength of light is triggering a specific biochemical reaction. So as Becker found in the 60s, it's the energy systems in the body that control the biochemistry. And so this is very important for us to understand, because it means that if we have a healthy diet and we get all of the raw materials that we need to maintain our health, we can use technology, we can use light in its various manifestations to improve our health in some very powerful ways. So light is the main orchestration by which everything else happens in the body. So we'll go back to our testosterone examples here, because we're in California and I know some men want to elevate their testosterone. Instead of having to get an injection of testosterone, get it exogenously, we can simply go out in the sun, take our shirts off, and expose the androgen receptors in our trapezius muscles to ultraviolet light, and that will increase testosterone production, in addition to vitamin D. So, ladies, if you ever wondered why men are exceptionally horny in the summer, you have to look no further at a beach where men don't have any shirts on, and this is the explanation. It's not an excuse, but it's the explanation. Okay. So the question becomes, how can we use light in a way to stop and reverse human aging? So we have been doing these experiments now for well over 10 years. And the place this started was to take an ordinary metal like tin. Now, we've done this with aluminum, we've done this with copper and bismuth, a variety of other metals, but I'm just going to use tin as an example. And if we take tin and we expose it to oxygen, this could be pure oxygen or even just there's enough oxygen in the ambient air, and we expose it to heat, we get a normal tin oxide. There's nothing unusual about that. However, if we were to use electromagnetic energy, and we were to introduce the electromagnetic energy during this process while the oxygen is binding to the metal, what we found is that we can create an entirely new species of metal oxide that never existed before. And this is something that I received a number of patents on. So this reminds me of Steve Jobs. You know one thing I didn't like about Steve Jobs? This is kind of like from a Bill Burr joke, so I'm going to borrow it. But what I didn't like about Steve Jobs is he always went out on stage by himself and took credit for everything, right? Walked out there in a t-shirt, no socks, like it was no biggie, right? And he never gave credit to his engineers. Well, we have one of our engineers today who has been our chief engineer at our laboratory. I just want to recognize him for a moment, Mr. George Sanchez. Give him a nice round of applause. So George has been with me now for more than 15 years. I think we're going on 17 years together. And I come up with all these crazy ideas, and George is the best computer programmer, CAD designer that you will ever find. So I come in and say, hey, George, you know, here is a scratch of an invention. He looks at it and says, yeah, I think I can design that. He'll design it in the computer. We print a model on a 3D printer. We take it to the machine shop that we have, and now all of a sudden we have a working invention. So this came as a result of a collaboration between Big George and I. So what we found, and here's the really interesting part. So keep in mind, we're taking a metal and we're taking oxygen and we're bringing them together to form something that never existed before, and we're doing that by embedding light, or we're using electromagnetism to change the angle at which the metal and the oxygen bind to one another. And when we change the frequency or the wavelength of light, the color of the metal changes. So we can produce something that looks like gold, red, orange, blues, purples, all by using energy. And then we send these out to labs, and what we find is that these materials never existed before, and they have some really interesting applications. So why is this important? Why am I sharing this with you? It's because hydrogen has a metallic state. And if we think of hydrogen as a metal, and we think about it with respect to these experiments, it means if we took hydrogen and we took oxygen, and during their formation we used electromagnetism or light, we might be able to create an entirely new species of water that never existed before. So this was the genesis, this was the beginning of X2O. And those initial laboratory experiments were incredibly rewarding, but it has taken us a long time to take that from a laboratory experiment to equipment that we could actually put into something we could manufacture, and there's been a lot of stumbling blocks along the way. But fortunately, we've gotten there now. So that's what X2O is all about. So one of the questions is, if we have a new technology now for creating a new type of water that never existed before, what wavelengths of light should we use and why? Well, this is where we look to nature. So if we can understand how certain species like lobster are defying the aging process, and we know that it's light that all living systems are using for communication, that means if we can understand this biological code, or as we call it, the code of creation, if we could understand this biological code, that means we can put those wavelengths of light that are responsible for a species' biological immortality, we can put that into water. And if we put that into water and human beings can consume it, that means the water goes everywhere throughout the body, so now we have a way of delivering light throughout the entire body. So we look at spectrophotometry data and studies that have been done on lobster, and we see that one of the critical wavelengths of light is 550 nanometers. We see there's another interesting peak of light between 700 and 710 nanometers, and we also know that from stem cell experiments that we've done that 630 nanometer light is critical for energy production and mobilization of stem cells. So 550, 710, 630. That's the code that lobsters are using. Last night, I had the opportunity to share with you the code that is found in the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. We see the numbers 999, 888, 777. And we see the ratios of one number to another. These are the same ratios. So when God was creating all things, he put his signature in light into species that are immortal as a sign of his existence. So this is normal distilled water that we freeze, and we put this in a beaker, and you can see there's nothing unusual about it, it's just normal ice. However, when we take water from X2O, water that is infused with light, it adopts a very specific structure. It becomes highly coherent. And as a matter of fact, the water implodes and releases energy. So you can see that there is these highly organized crystal threads that implode like a vortex. We even see a vortex funnel form inside of this ice. It's the same formation we see in all living systems. So this is what this process looks like over time. We take distilled water, doesn't matter what type of water it is, but you get slightly different effects depending on the type of water. But we use distilled water because it's a control. But you can see we process this now for 2.5 hours, 3.25 hours, and you can see the water is imploding and forming this beautiful egg-shaped vortex funnel in the center, and the ice threads are moving closer. Interestingly, the longer that we process the water becomes so coherent that it becomes crystal clear like glass. So let's show a quick video of what this looks like. So we see the water, as it freezes, forms these crystal threads. This is evidence that these are highly coherent structures, not random oscillations, chaotic oscillations as you would find in normal ice. And then we get this vortex bubble that forms in the center. So this is a pattern that we see in nature around all living systems, and we've duplicated that in the water that you now can drink. Okay. All right, let's continue on. Okay, so what happens when we drink this water? Simply, the studies that we have now on X2O show that when you drink this water, within the first 15 seconds, there's a measurable increase in bioelectrical activity of the body. Many people will experience this as an improvement in circulations. Those of you that have tried it, you know that you can feel this rush of energy that goes up into your head. You experience improvements in cognition, in awareness. Some people experience a buzzing effect in the frontal lobes and around the eyes. So we get a very pronounced bioelectrical effect within seconds of drinking the water. That's measurable. 100%. I think it's really cool. 100% of the people that drink this have a measurable change. So we have an incredible product to market. When we do urine testing, amongst urine testing, blood tests, we see measurable changes in the metabolism. And a pattern begins to form when we look at which amino acids specifically are being metabolized. So glycine, which of course is part of copper peptide, part of glutathione, increases in metabolism from consuming X2O. Valine, one of the branched chain amino acids necessary for muscle protein synthesis, that increases when consuming X2O. Proline, which is, as we know, foundational for collagen production, and collagen production is foundational for longevity, increases when we consume X2O. And then leucine, of course, which activates mTOR for muscle protein synthesis. Those of you that are athletes will notice that when you consume X2O, as long as you're taking enough protein and getting enough exercise, you'll build muscle faster with X2O. And then importantly, because we're talking about longevity, we see that X2O activates the KP pathway, which turns on production of NAD, which again is a key molecule in anti-aging and age reversal. Interestingly, in vitro work that we've done with X2O has shown an increased production of NAD in the fibroblasts, which is what makes collagen. Users report of course, improved energy, what someone experienced with X2O, improvements in energy, which lasts 3 to 5 hours, improvements in cognition, improvements in eyesight. These aren't necessarily all things that we're going to be making claims about, because we're not going to make medical claims, but general improvements in overall health and wellness, which lasts for many hours. So life is about energy and information. X2O infuses water with light that stimulates energy production throughout the body. And this is the first time there's been a technology available where we can put light inside the body and have it go everywhere needed. So we're in the perfect place to market this product and help millions of people around the world. Okay, now with that, I'd like to invite up to the stage a man with deep experience in marketing and brand strategy, and we're very lucky to have him here at Lifewave. He's helped to define, communicate, and activate brands from startups to Fortune 500 companies. He has helped lead the team at Lifewave, which got us a DSN Bravo Award. So please welcome to the stage Senior Vice President of Marketing and Communications, Mr. Wayne Moorhead.
Amazing information. I'm so excited. Thank you. I'm so excited to learn more. This right here, I think, represents one of my favorite parts of my job, the coolest thing that I get to do. And that is be at events like this or on the monthly webinar with you, where I get to learn more about Lifewave's incredible products directly from you. And I'm especially excited about today because we get to learn about the latest innovations and the latest products that you're launching. So I was back there listening intently about all the incredible X2O information, and I'd love to go a little bit deeper and have us learn more about this category-creating product.
Let's do it.
So this product was years in development, and I'm curious, what was the inspiration or the catalyst that really drove you to bring this to market?
Yeah, so the first part about this is that our laboratory wants to stop and reverse human aging. And we have looked at a whole variety of different species. We've looked at planaria, hydractinia. We looked at a species of ant that has a very interesting pattern of aging that human beings can benefit from, of course, lobsters. And at first, this was all about giving people a tool so as they age, they can get younger in the process. And the idea is that the impact that this could have on society in a very practical way is that we could, if enough people implemented these strategies, we can decrease healthcare costs, we can keep more people in the workforce, keep them productive into later in their lives, give people more meaning to their life, and also use this as a driver to maybe change how people think about healthcare. If people can drink water, something as simple as water, and it's infused with light, maybe people start thinking about, well, maybe I'm a being of light, and maybe we can have a little bit more peace in the world. We shouldn't be trying to harm others. We should be trying to help others. So that was some of the initial thinking.
I love that because it's always so inspiring to hear the origin stories of these products and innovations. And every time I ask you, it always starts with the impact. It always starts with helping people live better, live longer. And that's one of the inspiring reasons that we all love working for you so much. So I'm curious, you've leveraged light in so many interesting ways, in so many interesting products. Why is water such a powerful delivery system for light?
So when we were doing our experiments on metals, some of the things that, for example, we developed a completely new and revolutionary solar cell, as an example, by creating a new type of metal that acts, well, I can't get into it.
Okay. I know,
but
the
let's
words
just say,
would go over my head. It's fine, I totally understand.
Let's just say we found a better way to convert light over into electricity. I just leave it at that. And so the thinking was, if we can embed wavelengths of light into metals, how can we apply this knowledge for human health? Because upregulating energy in the cell is so foundational to age reversal. So the thinking was water goes everywhere in the body. It would be the ideal carrier of light if we could figure out a way to create a new structure for water to deliver that light. So it became very obvious early on that water would be the ideal carrier for light. The question is, how do you actually do that? So that's what that.
It's amazing. Well, thank you for bringing water to light, and the first product to ever do so. Thank you. So bringing an entirely new innovation to the world that no one has ever seen before, no one has ever experienced before, nor has anyone ever manufactured before, has to be terribly complex and daunting. I can't even imagine what that must be like. But what I've learned from you is the process is always about innovating and iterating, and really the magic happens in the perseverance. That's where it kind of all comes together. But can you share any challenges that kind of stick out in bringing this incredible product to market?
There have been lots of challenges.
Okay. I'm sure. I know.
There are lots of challenges. Actually, I think it's good to share some of this for a variety of reasons. We're all going to face challenges in our life, whether or not they be financial challenges, challenges with our health, challenges in relationships. And these are really opportunities to grow as a human being. And they're also opportunities to turn to God and ask for help and build our relationship with the Lord. And so when we're faced with a challenge in life, we should first move to acceptance and embrace it, and then look within and look towards help from others about how we can overcome this challenge and become better as a result. So from the very beginning of Lifewave, when I started the company, perhaps 80% of the people that I met told me that this company would never succeed. We had times in the very early days of the company, 2005, 2006, where we nearly went out of business. But through patience, persistence, a lot of prayer, a lot of great people to work with, we were able to become stronger as a result. So this is to say that when you're encountering your challenges in your life, it's not something that you have to be afraid of. It's something that you can embrace and become stronger when you come out the back end. And with X2O, as it turns out, when you're trying to create a technology that never existed before, it's very difficult to work with engineers that learn things in textbooks, and now you're introducing a new data set that's outside of their knowledge or experience, and have them be able to understand some of the challenges that will occur. So we've had complications in the design. One really good example, problem that George and I went through going through this war was Kelly and I found that the distance that the lights need to be from one another is very precise. It's like tuning a musical instrument. And we had our drawings of X2O. We passed those along to industrial design engineers to turn this into a system. We get back the prototype, and it didn't work. And we went through all these different types of tests. Is it the filtration? Is it the water we're using? What's going on? So we opened up the system, and we found that the engineers had decided to change the distance of the light panels to make all the components fit inside the machine. And they did that so they could reduce the size of the machine. And it's like, no, this is the drawing we gave you. This is what we need to have made. So it's been a lot of challenges like that, and that's held up our launch of X2O for a year, but I'm really happy to say that we've overcome all of these challenges now, and we'll be back on track with X2O.
Well, I know that we are all grateful that you persevered and pushed through and innovated and iterated to bring X2O to market, and all those other times that you just mentioned with Lifewave, or none of us would be here today. So thank you for all that you do, David.
Well, we had, I had a number of people contact me who were suffering from a number of health conditions that we can't mention, and they got an early version of X2O. And they got remarkable results with the product. And I want to tell our community how much I appreciate hearing the testimonials and these experiences. And in the case of something like X2O, because there were so many challenges that were incredibly frustrating, knowing that even just a few people had had these life-changing experiences, you know, the attitude about this was, this can't fail. I really believe, because the challenges we've had over the past year have been so unusual, that this has been an instance where the forces of darkness push against our company and want to prevent this technology from coming out because it's going to help so many people. Yeah. So that makes me want to push even harder.
Yeah. Well, I've been fortunate to read some of those stories and hear some of the testimonials, and I cannot wait till this product gets around the world. And I know that it's right around the corner. But I know one of the questions we might get with something that is so innovative, that really has created its own category, it may mistakenly get associated with another, water product or filter on the market. Can you explain a little bit how this is an entirely different product?
Yeah, so we had a phenomenal team, phenomenal marketing team. I want to give a shout out to Laura Kelly, who's been running our new product development. Laura is absolutely amazing. And I also want to give a shout out to Jules Rudick, who has been taking this and converting it over to manufacturing. And I don't want to leave anybody out. We have a phenomenal team. So one of the decisions we made early on was that because it was going to be expensive to make the basic technology, that people should be able to put any type of water into the machine and then use it. So that means we needed to have 2 separate stages of filtration. So the first stage takes out all of the harmful chemicals, the forever chemicals, pesticides, herbicides, chlorine. And then the second stage also removes additional contaminants and then infuses the water with hydrogen. And we did that because, of course, we're combining hydrogen and oxygen into this new species of water. So filtration is a part of the machine, but it is not the functional part of how this is creating this entirely unique species of water. So there is no other system on the market like this.
Absolutely, yeah.
And we have, in fact, received patents on X2O, so we won't have any competitors either.
So I know from watching you, a critical part of your innovation process is the validation, is the clinical studies, and you talked about a few of them and the incredible speed that benefits are being seen, the physiological effects. I'm curious, were you surprised even by those results, or is that exactly what you expected?
We've never performed clinical studies on any of our products where we had 100% of the people respond. Even with Icewave, we got to 96% of people responding with pain relief, but never in any of our products was 100%. And the reason is pretty clear, because many people are dehydrated, they don't have enough electrolytes, so we're always going to get a percentage of people. But as products go, the patches are extraordinary because we consistently see more than 80% of people respond. But with X2O, it's been 100%, and you would I think, expect to see the reaction be very rapid, but it's another thing entirely when you're sitting in the lab and you actually see the needles on the machine changing within 15 seconds. That's like, okay, this works really well.
Yeah. That's an understatement, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So you showed, I love watching the video of the ice being frozen, or the water being frozen into ice. Can you speak a little bit more about what's happening at the molecular level?
Yeah, so one way to think about this is you have in water, of course, it's hydrogen and oxygen, and you have these bonds. And what we're taught in school is that the bond angle of water is fixed. But that's really not the case. The bond angle can be manipulated under the right conditions. And when you do so, the properties of water change. Also, some people mistakenly think that all water is more or less the same, and then again, that's not the case. Water can take on many different properties under the right conditions. So for example, if you took a specific mineral and only added 4 or 5 parts per million of that mineral, the water structure changes, whereas if you have 10 or 20 parts per million, you don't see this effect. So this tells us a lot about the nature of water. So in this particular case with X2O, what we're doing is using very specific wavelengths of light, and this requires 6 different wavelengths of light to form this phenomena, where we create coherent resonant domains between the hydrogen and oxygen bonds. So the water in effect traps the light in resonance. The photons bounce back and forth between the hydrogen and oxygen bonds. They get trapped and they stay there for a period of time. This is a highly controversial theory amongst the community of people that study water, which most people don't think this is a legitimate phenomena. But you have to look no further than our clinical studies to show that, in fact, when people drink this water, there are measurable changes bioelectrically, biochemically measurable in the urine and the blood. So we have very clearly been able to embed light into water and demonstrate that this has a very powerful physiological effect within minutes of consuming.
Yeah, it's incredible. So seeing the kind of immediate physiological responses, can you talk a little bit more about the long-term health benefits of consuming this on a daily basis?
Well, we're still studying this. So the studies that we've done on X2O have principally been with the immediate effects because we haven't had the machines available to do the long-term studies. But we've had people in a test group that have been using the water consistently, and many of the things they experience we can't talk about because they would be medical claims. Some of the daily benefits that people have, though, the most pronounced benefit, I would say, that's observable is a dramatic improvement in energy. We often caution people not to drink X2O after 3 p.m. because they may be staying awake till 11, 12 o'clock at night. And I know people here that just laughed in our test group, they found out the hard way.
I think they tried it, yeah.
Yeah. Improvements in cognition, improvements in awareness, better absorption of nutrition, which is why we recommend putting Celergize into X2O. So there's numerous general wellness benefits to consuming X2O.
It's incredible.
Numerous.
Yeah, I can't wait till we hear even more stories, all these incredible stories that we're already hearing.
Yep.
So you mentioned not consuming it after 3 o'clock. Can you share a little bit more about the proper way to consume it, fasted, unfasted, what time of day? When is the ideal time?
Well, what we've done in our studies is have people consume the water more or less first thing in the morning. So I would encourage people to experiment a little bit. Try it as a pre-workout. Try it as after working out in the morning. But any time within the morning is fine, or even around midday. Our studies have been done with people consuming 1 glass of water per day, but we have some highly energetic brand partners and leaders that have wanted to consume 2, 3, 4 glasses a day. So those effects clinically are not well defined yet. We do want to be exploring this. We're going to be doing some research with Dr. Jensen on looking at telomere length, looking at gene expression, and seeing over a 6 to 9 month period of time what influence does this have on longevity.
That's great. Thank you. Yes, thank you. So another one of your innovation philosophies that I found so inspiring is this concept of synergy, where so many other companies develop a portfolio of disparate products. You intentionally design them to work together, to optimize, to accelerate the benefits of one another. Can you share a little bit more about why this is such a powerful product design philosophy?
So the product that everyone should start with is X39.
I know that voice. I know that voice.
Of course, until I invent another patch.
Yeah, that's right.
Which may or may not exist. But we start with X39. That is the perfect way to introduce people to Lifewave. Celergize would be incredibly important because it provides all of the nutrition. We're talking about the morning formula now. Provides all the nutrition that people need to complement all of our Lifewave patches, including X39. And then, of course, at some point, introducing X2O. And the reason why these are so synergistic is that the body requires water to function. And when we see people not responding to the patches, it's almost always because of dehydration. So why not have a water that penetrates the cell, improves hydration, improves all these other benefits, works with light, works in synergy with the patches, and then Celergize will provide those nutrients to make all of this possible. So they are, in fact, the perfect combination for people to achieve the results they want.
Absolutely. So we're out of time, but final question. What does the introduction of X2O mean for the future of Lifewave and for the future of human potential?
You know, for this first 20 years, just speaking from a business perspective, for the first 20 years, we've been able to build the business with our patch technology, and there is still a certain segment of the population that has a problem understanding how something that's non-transdermal could have such powerful effects on the human body. And now we're really crossing over into new territory where it's very easy to understand how consuming something could have a health benefit, and X2O is incredibly powerful. So I think what's going to happen is when we market X2O, it's going to open Lifewave to an audience that we weren't able to capture before, and then they're going to be more open to saying, well, if this light-infused water changed my health, maybe I should try X39 since that's working with light also. So I think X2O will support the launch of our other products as well.
Well, David, thank you for creating this incredible product, for bringing your vision to life, and for keeping Lifewave at the forefront of human health and wellness. So appreciate your time.
Thank you,
Wayne.
sir. Thank you
Appreciate
very much. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Inspired by nature, brought to life by innovation. X2O is the world's first water technology system designed to energize and optimize your body by creating a water infused with light when you drink it. That light is released into your body, improving the flow of energy and supporting a new level of wellness. Revolutionary technology, redefining the future of well-being, combining two of Earth's oldest and most valuable resources, water and light. Optimizing wellness, inspiring longevity, amplifying your healthy lifestyle. Designed for simplicity, engineered with excellence, X2O utilizes Lifewave's patented 3-phase process. Light infusion technology, advanced dual-stage filtration to remove most contaminants, and hydrogen enrichment, transforming everyday water into elevated hydration. It's water reimagined. Going beyond traditional replenishment to optimize hydration at the cellular level, activating key physiological responses, often within seconds. natural energy, efficient detoxification, overall well-being enhancing cellular capacity to boost nutrient absorption, metabolic activity, and oxygen uptake, so you feel energized, focused, and ready for the day ahead. And with molecular hydrogen enrichment, X2O offers antioxidant support to help protect your cells with longevity in mind, promoting circulation, bioelectrical activity, and vitality, targeting overall wellness with intention, amplifying the effects of Lifewave's patches and nutritional supplements, making X2O a powerful part of your everyday wellness routine. Transform how you hydrate. Enlightened water, elevated hydration. X2O light-infused water technology. Be the light. Lifewave.
Wow, who's thirsty after that? Excited to try that.